Today we're going to talk about a component in a computer called RAM. It stands for Random Access Memory. In order to fully understand it, we need to look at what the M part of it is, memory. So your computer's job is to take in data, work with that data, and then send that data on, typically to another computer or a display, that sort of thing. And because your computer works with data, it needs places to store data that it's working with. This might be a document you're creating in a word processing program, that sort of thing. It places that data in a physical device called memory. Now there's one kind of memory that's permanent. In other words, you turn the computer off and turn it back on again, and that data is still stored there. We're not going to look at that part right now. We're looking at a type of memory that the computer uses while it's running that's very fast. The computer can put data into it and retrieve data from it very, very quickly, which is a valuable function inside a computer. And that's what RAM is. Physically, it looks something like this. This is a stick of RAM. They call it a stick. It's a slang term. Each of these individual black boxes here is what's called a chip. And this is where the data is actually stored. Inside each of these little teeny pieces are literally millions of individual electronic circuits that can store electronic data, the data your computer works with. So that's what memory is. Now, physically, it goes in a computer in a place similar to this. What you're looking at right here looks complex. It doesn't need to be. This is called the motherboard. It's where most of the important parts inside a computer live. You don't see this part. It's inside the actual box that your computer is. This spot right here is where what's called a central processing unit goes. That's the brains of the computer. The thing that's in charge of taking data in, working with the data, and sending the data out. And the RAM, the memory, physically is installed near the CPU because the little wires that connect these two pieces make it so that the CPU can use the RAM, the memory. And because it's so close, it takes very little time for the CPU to put data into the memory or take data out of the memory. So that's memory. Now, let's talk about the random access part of it. What random access means in terms of this kind of memory device is that if you were to pick any piece of data that's stored on here at random, the amount of time it would take between the computer asking for that data and then the data arriving back to the computer, in other words, the central processing unit, is exactly the same. It takes the exact same amount of time for data retrieval for any piece of data stored in this device. And that's actually a really big deal because it wasn't always that way. In the past, the memory devices that were used on computers had a variable amount of time that it took for any piece of data you might pick at random in terms of how long it took for the data to arrive to the computer. And that had to do with their physical construction. These have no moving parts. And because of that, again, pick any piece of data at random on there, and it takes the exact same amount of time between asking for the data and retrieving the data for the computer, which makes your computer able to operate a lot more quickly than older versions of computer devices. So there you have it, RAM. Again, it stands for Random Access Memory. Memory is where you store the electronic data your computer takes in, works with, and then sends on to other computers or devices. And if you have more memory in your computer can operate a lot more quickly because this is where the computer stores the things that you're working with at any given moment. The documents or spreadsheets or videos that you're working with are stored here so they're able to be easily accessed by the CPU. When you want permanent storage of those things, that goes into a different place, a different device inside the computer. And we'll talk about that later. But there you have it, RAM.